face a brand new chart for the head and for the heart. It's your journey, your tools.
Usually when we think about our bad habits, we picture a courtroom.
Yeah, that's a really common way to look at it.
Right, like there's a judge banging a gavel, looking down at us, basically declaring us guilty of having absolutely zero willpower. We view our late-night doom scrolling or, that sudden urge to eat an entire sleeve of cookies as definitive proof that we are fundamentally broken.
Which is such a heavy burden to carry around.
Exactly. But what if that courtroom is just a total illusion? Welcome to a brand new deep dive. Today, we are taking you, our listener, through some incredible insights from a text called Rewiring the Addicted Brain, a neurobiological guide to recovery.
And honestly, this is going to be a fascinating journey.
It really is. Whether you struggle with constantly checking your phone, emotional eating, or just feeling completely overwhelmed by modern conveniences, we are going to fundamentally change how you view your own brain.
So to start, I want you to picture a map of our ancient primitive neural networks overlaid directly on top of a neon-lit, hyper-stimulating modern cityscape.
That visual perfectly captures the clash we are exploring today, right? Ancient biology slamming headfirst into modern environments.
It is the ultimate biological collision. And our goal today is to really dismantle that courtroom myth you mentioned. The idea that compulsive behaviors represent some kind of moral failure or a sign of a broken brain is just scientifically inaccurate.
Wait, so it's not a flaw?
Not at all.
Phew.
The neurobiology we are looking at shows how the exact mechanisms that wire your brain for a compulsion are actually highly evolved features. Once you understand the mechanics of those features, you can deliberately harness them to rewire your brain for resilience.
The premise here just shifts the entire paradigm. I mean,
Sure.
The human brain is an evolutionary masterpiece, but it was meticulously designed for environments of extreme scarcity.
Right, which is the exact opposite of where we live now.
Exactly. So a compulsive behavior isn't a broken system. It's a highly efficient learning system operating in a modern environment of unprecedented abundance. And to grasp how this works, we really have to look at dopamine.
Which is completely misunderstood.
Yeah, pop culture has totally gotten what dopamine actually does wrong, hasn't it?
Oh, completely. Society has branded dopamine as the pleasure chemical. But neurobiologically, it is the currency of motivation, desire, and learning.
So it's not about feeling good.
Well, not primarily. It operates in the reward pathways of the brain, essentially telling an organism, hey, this is critical for survival, do it again. Or, this is bad, avoid it. To see how the system gets hijacked by modern life, we have to separate how dopamine operates into two very distinct modes.
Right, tonic and phasic. So let's unpack tonic dopamine first. This is basically the baseline, right?
Yes, exactly. Tonic dopamine is the steady, continuous, low-level release of the neurotransmitter just humming in the background. A healthy tonic dopamine level gives you a general sense of motivation, energy, and mood stability.
It's what gets you out of bed.
Right. It allows you to sustain effort toward difficult long-term goals without needing instant gratification. But phasic dopamine, well, that operates entirely differently.
Okay, how so?
These are rapid, transient bursts that last only milliseconds to seconds. A phasic spike is triggered when you encounter something novel, highly salient, or, unexpectedly rewarding.
Like finding food in the wild.
Exactly. If an early human foraging in the woods suddenly stumbled upon a rare beehive full of calorie-dense honey, that phasic spike screams, pay intense attention, remember exactly how we got here so we can do it again.
Okay, let me try a car analogy here. So tonic dopamine is like the steady background hum of an engine keeping a car moving forward on a long road trip.
I like where this is going.
And then phasic dopamine is like hitting the nitrous oxide button when you need an immediate explosive burst of speed.
That analogy maps perfectly to the biology. The tonic hum gets you through everyday life, while the phasic nitrous blast forces your brain to learn and remember specific, high-value survival behaviors.
But wait, how does a chemical burst actually teach the brain what to do? The leap from a chemical spike to a learned automatic behavior seems like a missing puzzle piece.
It does seem like a jump, but the mechanism bridging that gap is a computational model of learning called reward prediction error, or RPE.
Reward prediction error, okay.
Yeah. Pioneering research by Wolfram Schultz with primates revealed something totally counterintuitive. He found that dopamine neurons don't simply fire when you receive a reward. They encode the difference between what you expected to get and what you actually got.
So dopamine is fundamentally a surprise detector.
Exactly. In his experiments, monkeys were given a juice reward, and their dopamine spiked. But once they learned that a light turning on predicted the juice, the dopamine spiked when the light came on, not when they got the juice.
Oh, wow, because the juice was no longer a surprise.
Right. If a stimulus is better or more novel than expected, you get a positive prediction error. The brain floods with a massive phasic dopamine burst, reinforcing the behavior and transferring the motivational value to the cues that led to it.
Meaning, if the reward is exactly what you expected, dopamine just stays at its tonic baseline.
Precisely. And critically, if a reward is omitted or worse than expected, dopamine firing actively pauses. It drops below baseline into a negative prediction error.
And that chemical drop teaches you to avoid that action in the future.
You've got it. That drop feels bad, so your brain learns not to repeat the mistake.
So if RPE is the algorithm running human motivation, then we are facing a massive vulnerability today. I mean, we aren't hunting for rare honey anymore.
Not at all. We are surrounded by infinite algorithmic social media feeds and hyperpalatable processed foods.
Right, we carry supercomputers in our pockets running adaptive machine learning algorithms designed specifically to maximize our screen time by flashing unpredictable content at us. It's basically a non-stop engineered barrage of positive prediction errors.
It really is. The environment has been drogified. That's a concept from Dr. Anna Lembke. These engineered stimuli produce unnatural phasic dopamine spikes that our ancestors never ever faced.
So the system gets overwhelmed.
Completely. The dopamine system stops functioning as a reward detector and becomes a relentless surprise detector, constantly driving you toward the next novel stimulus. And because the brain is incredibly smart, it relentlessly seeks homeostasis.
Homeostasis being a state of physiological equilibrium.
Exactly. To understand how a seemingly harmless habit transitions into a compulsion, we have to look at how the brain processes pleasure and pain. In the brain, the regions that process pleasure are co-located with the regions that process pain.
They operate exactly like a balance scale or teeter-totter,
Yes.
right?
So when you get hit with one of those massive unnatural dopamine spikes from an infinite video feed or at a slot machine, you slam that teeter-totter heavily onto the side of pleasure.
But the brain demands homeostasis. It doesn't like being out of balance.
Right. To protect itself from this unnatural surge, it immediately initiates an opponent process to level the scale. It downregulates its own dopamine transmission by reducing the number of active dopamine receptors.
Wait, so it decreases its own natural dopamine production?
Yeah. It tips the scale an equal and opposite amount toward the side of pain to balance out that massive surge of pleasure. This opponent process causes your steady tonic dopamine baseline to drop.
Plunging you into a transient dopamine deficit state.
Exactly. And subjectively, to you, that deficit state feels like the psychological pain of a craving, irritability, and profound anxiety.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Are you saying that when someone is mindlessly scrolling on their phone for an hour, they aren't even enjoying it anymore?
That's entirely possible, yes.
They are just engaging in the behavior to try and fix the dopamine deficit that the phone created in the very first place.
That is the exact mechanism of tolerance. Your tonic dopamine baseline becomes chronically depressed, resulting in reduced reward sensitivity.
So you aren't scrolling or eating to get high.
No, you are doing it just to momentarily relieve the pain of the deficit and feel normal for a few fleeting seconds. As this cycle repeats, the circuitry in the brain's reward center becomes hypersensitized to the quick fix.
And this causes structural dysregulation, right? The prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive control center responsible for long-term planning and delayed gratification, it just gets systematically bypassed.
Yes, the primal reward pathway gets so loud and demanding that it overrides the logical decision-making part of the brain. The communication lines to the stress centers in the amygdala get altered.
Suddenly, the compulsion isn't a conscious choice anymore. It's a survival-based reaction. You logically know you should stop, but your brain acts as if this quick fix is the only way to survive the stress of the dopamine deficit.
The overactivation of this system drives compulsive seeking behavior despite a genuine desire to stop. And when society views this through a moral lens and calls it a character flaw, it generates deep toxic shame.
And shame is a massive psychological stressor.
Huge. Because the addicted brain's stress circuits are already highly sensitized, that shame triggers neuroinflammation and autonomic nervous system arousal. The brain feels under threat.
So it instinctively seeks the only coping mechanism it knows will provide instant relief, the exact behavior you're trying to stop.
Exactly. It becomes a self-fulfilling loop. Recognizing this as an evolutionary mismatch, rather than a personal weakness, breaks that loop of shame.
This is incredibly empowering because if the brain possesses the biological brilliance to structurally wire itself so deeply for a destructive habit, it must possess the exact same biological power to override it.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
We are just running outdated software, and the mechanism to update that software is structural neuroplasticity.
Right. Neuroplasticity is the nervous system's ability to physically change its structure, reorganize its networks, and alter its connections based on experience. And this learning happens at a microscopic cellular level.
How does that actually work with dopamine?
Well, when you experience those massive dopamine surges from a quick fix, it triggers structural changes on the dendrites of the neurons in your reward pathways.
Dendrites being the little branches on neurons.
Yes. Through a process called long-term potentiation, or LTP, repeated exposure causes the rapid growth of new dendritic spines, tiny physical protrusions that increase synaptic connections.
Okay, so rather than thinking of it like pouring concrete on a highway, it's more like a river carving a canyon into rock.
That is the perfect visual.
Every time you give in to a craving, you send a rush of water down that specific riverbed, carving the canyon deeper and deeper, which makes it harder for the water to flow anywhere else.
Exactly. The deeper the canyon, the more automatic the habit. Neuroplasticity is completely agnostic, It doesn't judge whether a habit is good or bad. It just wires what you repeat.
So what is the biological goal of recovery then?
The goal is long-term depression, or LTD. This is the process of weakening those synaptic connections by starving the old habit loop of activation.
So when the water stops flowing, the brain eventually prunes those old dendritic spines.
Right. But recovery relies on extinction learning. When you are exposed to a trigger and feel a massive craving, but you consciously choose not to engage in the habit, your prefrontal cortex actively generates a new, competing inhibitory memory.
Okay, wait. If I understand this extinction learning concept correctly, a craving isn't a sign that my brain is still broken.
No, not at all.
If my first instinct is to feel like I'm failing because I want the quick fix, I actually have it backward. The craving is the raw physiological material I need to build resilience.
Exactly. Every time you experience the urge without acting on it, you are constructing new dendritic spines in your prefrontal cortex. It is literally a rep at the brain gym.
Oh, wow. I love that. A rep at the brain gym.
Yeah, experiencing the urge and navigating through it is the neurobiological prerequisite for structural change. But, knowing the biology is foundational, but we have to translate this into an actionable framework.
Right, because theory only goes so far.
Exactly. To fix the software, you need radical visibility over your current operating system. Because these habits are so automatic, you have to drag them back into the conscious purview of the prefrontal cortex through a process of auditing.
Which means mapping out the loop, the cue, the craving, and the reward.
Yep. Cues can be an internal feeling of anxiety, a specific time of day, or, the notification chime on your phone.
And that cue triggers the craving, which is that painful dopamine deficit state demanding resolution.
Right. Then comes the reward, a quick fix that temporarily relieves the tension but sets you up for the inevitable crash.
So by mapping this out, the habit kind of loses its mystique. It is no longer a mysterious personal failing. It's just a predictable mechanical sequence.
Exactly. It demystifies the whole process.
But recognizing the sequence brings up a massive dilemma. If our logic center is bypassed in the heat of the moment, how do we physically stop ourselves? I mean, willpower clearly isn't enough.
Willpower is an exhaustible resource. It's heavily reliant on a prefrontal cortex that is already compromised by the hijacked dopamine system.
So trying to outthink it is a losing battle.
Yes. Relying on willpower alone when a craving hits is biologically inefficient. This is where environmental design, specifically self-binding, becomes necessary.
Self-binding.
Yeah, self-binding means deliberately creating friction between yourself and the compulsion while you are in a clear state of mind, long before the cue ever presents itself.
What does that friction look like in practice?
Well, it falls into 3 categories. Physical strategies involve spatial barriers, like using a timed lockbox for your phone, or keeping highly processed junk food completely out of your house.
Okay, what about the other 2?
Chronological strategies use time as a barrier. For instance, implementing a digital sunset, where all screens power down at 8:00 p.m. to give your reward pathways time to rest before sleep.
And the third category?
Categorical strategies. This involves avoiding secondary triggers. A person struggling with sports betting, for example, might intentionally avoid watching all sports television to prevent the cues from initiating the craving cascade.
I mean, I have to push back a little here. Implementing lockboxes and curfews sounds a lot like admitting defeat. Instead of building mental fortitude and facing the temptation, we are just hiding the cookie jar. Isn't that a cop-out?
I get why it sounds like that, but it's strategic biological management. You wouldn't expect someone with a broken leg to run a marathon through sheer willpower, right?
Well, no, of course not.
So why expect a compromised prefrontal cortex to effortlessly overpower a hypersensitized limbic system? Self-binding protects you when your biology is most vulnerable.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And once your environment is secure, you can actively repair the pleasure-pain balance and elevate that chronically depressed tonic dopamine baseline. You do this through a process called hormesis.
Hormesis is the idea of intentionally doing difficult things to feel better, right? But how does inflicting discomfort actually repair the dopamine deficit?
Hormesis is the physiological phenomenon where exposing the body to short bursts of manageable stress or discomfort yields long-term neurological benefits.
Like an ice bath.
Exactly. When you do something acutely difficult like rigorous exercise or stepping into a freezing cold shower, you are intentionally pressing on the pain side of the brain's teeter-totter.
Because the brain relentlessly seeks homeostasis.
Yes, the brain responds to this acute discomfort by upregulating its natural dopamine production. It releases a sustained, healthy elevation of tonic dopamine that lasts for hours after the cold shower ends.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you safely raise your baseline, accelerating the repair of your dopamine receptors and teaching your brain to find joy in natural effort again.
Okay, so we map the cues, we build the physical barriers, and we take cold showers to fix the baseline. But let's look at the crucible of the present moment.
The hard part.
Right. What happens when you've done all that prep, but a massive craving still hits you on a random Tuesday afternoon? You are staring at the phone or the pantry, and the biological urge is overwhelming.
When that happens, you deploy a micro-habit called the dopamine delay. This is a non-negotiable rule. When the urge strikes, you must wait exactly 5 to 10 minutes before taking any action.
Why 10 minutes?
The neurobiology of cravings shows us that urges operate almost exactly like ocean waves. They rise, peak in intensity, and then they inevitably break and dissipate. An unmet craving rarely lasts longer than 20 to 30 minutes.
And the worst part is at the beginning.
Exactly. The most intense, overwhelming phase almost always subsides within the first 10 minutes. By enforcing that 10-minute delay, you create a temporal buffer.
You stop the automatic behavioral loop from executing.
Right, giving the chemical spike in your limbic system time to settle. As the emotional intensity drops, your prefrontal cortex comes back online, allowing you to make a rational, goal-directed choice.
During those 10 minutes, you aren't just white-knuckling it or staring at a wall in a cold sweat, though, right? Fighting the craving directly often causes more stress, which just fuels the urge.
No, you don't want to fight it. You practice urge surfing.
Urge surfing. So you treat the urge as a physical sensation to be observed. You acknowledge where you feel it in your body. Maybe it's a tightness in your chest or a fluttering in your stomach.
Exactly. You accept the sensation without judging yourself for having it.
You observe it by focusing on your breath, riding the physical feeling like a wave. Finally, you reorient back to the present moment as the sensation inevitably crashes. If you manage that, you have successfully built a new inhibitory memory.
That's spot on. But during that wave, the brain often fights back by launching a barrage of negative self-talk. It will tell you that you are weak, that you will never beat this habit.
Which is devastating in the moment.
It really is. This internal attack threatens your sense of self-worth. This is where Claude M. Steele's self-affirmation theory becomes a vital tool.
What does that theory say?
Steele found that human beings are deeply motivated to maintain a global sense of self-integrity, the belief that they are moral, competent, and capable. When a craving makes you feel deep shame, it threatens that integrity.
And that severe psychological distress often drives you right back to the bad habit to soothe the pain. But when my brain is screaming for a quick fix and telling me I'm weak, reciting a foundational affirmation feels a bit like toxic positivity.
I hear that a lot.
I mean, how does telling myself I'm a good person actually do anything biological in the middle of a craving?
The neurobiology behind it is quite profound. When you consciously reflect on your core values, reminding yourself that you are a compassionate friend, a resilient learner, or a capable parent, you anchor your global self-integrity.
So it zooms you out.
Yes. You prove to your brain that this one localized craving does not define your entire identity. This dramatically lowers defensive psychological distress.
By reciting an affirmation, you engage the prefrontal cortex through rational language.
Exactly. You soothe the panicking amygdala by replacing toxic shame with objective self-compassion. You are signaling to your nervous system that you are a potent, capable actor in your own life, keeping the logic centers online while the emotional centers try to sound the alarm.
So the affirmation is an active neurobiological tool, not just a way to feel warm and fuzzy.
Not at all warm and fuzzy. It's a biological intervention.
We have covered an incredible amount of ground today. We journeyed from understanding that your brain is a brilliant learning machine operating exactly as it evolved to recognizing how modern algorithmic stimuli hijack your reward prediction errors to create painful dopamine deficits.
Which is the core of the mismatch.
Right. And most importantly, we've seen that your cravings are the raw physiological materials you need to sculpt new, resilient neural pathways.
The journey of recovery isn't about achieving moral superiority. It is the ultimate act of self-directed neuroplasticity.
To you, listening to this right now, you have the toolkit. You have the ability to audit your habits, use self-binding to protect your prefrontal cortex, and rely on the dopamine delay and urge surfing to intentionally update your own software.
You are fully equipped to navigate this modern environment.
Absolutely.
I will leave you with a final thought to ponder long after we wrap up today. If our modern digital environment is increasingly driven by adaptive machine learning algorithms that are perfectly engineered to hijack our reward prediction errors, what happens to society's collective prefrontal cortex over the next decade?
That's a terrifying thought.
Will mastering conscious neuroplasticity transition from being a self-improvement tool to an absolute biological requirement for human survival?
That is a vital question to consider as we move forward. As you go about your day and you inevitably feel those urges pop up, remember our goal today. Step out of the courtroom.
Leave the judge behind.
Stop acting like a judge, handing down a guilty sentence to yourself. Start observing your urges like a scientist marveling at a brilliantly efficient machine. You have the power to update the code. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Your journey, your tools. It's the strength to build anew. It's the light to guide you through. It's the choice to find your way. Starting here, starting today.
Thank you for showing up for yourself today. Taking the time to reflect on your behaviors and understand your mindset is a massive step forward, and you should be incredibly proud of the work you are putting in. Remember, motivation is just the spark that gets you started, but it is the daily systems that will actually keep you going. Your brain is brilliantly adaptable, and with the right tools, you can rewire it to support your highest goals. Are you ready to transform your mindset and build systems that support your best self? The Your Journey. Your Tools app contains the exact blueprints, positive reinforcement, and diagnostic tools you need to thrive. Download the app today at www.yourjourneyyourtools.com. Be kind to yourself. You are doing better than you think, and I'll catch you on your journey.